Hi there, I'm John McAdams, founder of the Big Game Hunting blog. In this video, we're going to hear from the John Rigby & Company Managing Director, Marc Newton. Marc and I discuss the history of John Rigby & Company, we talk about some of their current rifle and shotgun offerings, and most importantly, we discuss the 2025 Rigby Dagga Boy Award in detail. As you will learn here shortly, Rigby has partnered with noted experts on buffalo hunting and conservation like Dr. Kevin Robertson and professional hunters Robin Hurt and Buzz Charlton to help incentivize the harvest of very old, past breeding age bulls that have lived a long and interesting life, but that will likely not quote unquote score very well under some of the current scoring systems. We will discuss more details of why they're trying to do this, what the folks at Rigby are hoping to accomplish with this award, and we will also discuss the Rigby rifles that will be awarded as prizes to the hunter that takes the quote-unquote winning buffalo. So let's go ahead and get started talking to Marc. Okay, well, good morning, Marc, or I guess afternoon in your time. It's a pleasure having you on the show today to talk to you about Rigby rifles and the Rigby Dagga Boy Award today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm calling in from a very wet and grey London, sort of middle of the afternoon here, but I think it's always wet and grey in London at this time of year.
Fair enough. Well, I'm sure that most people that are listening to this podcast have some familiarity with John Rigby and Company, but can you give us a brief history of the company, and then we'll go into talking about the Dagga Boy Award?
Absolutely. I'll try and keep it brief, that being the word. To anyone who knows me, has met me at the shows and other places, they know I can talk about Rigby all day long. It is my absolute passion. Rigby is the oldest British gun-making firm that has been in continuous existence since 1775. We're the third oldest gun-making company in the world. Originally founded by John Rigby in Dublin, Ireland. He quickly built a reputation of building fine quality military firearms, self-defense firearms, sporting firearms, these sorts of things. And there were some pretty interesting designs that he was coming up with. His two sons took on the company in the early part of the 19th century, where they continued to sort of develop these designs, the pursuit of excellence and everything they were doing. And it was really the third John Rigby, the third generation of the family in the business, who really sort of put the company on the map as we know it today. And that was from sort of 1860 onwards, where the Dublin operation was wound down. The company was moved to London. John Rigby was part of the Irish shooting team, so he had a fantastic knowledge of firearms. And then he was partnering with several notable gun makers, Peter Paul Mauser being one of them, who I'm sure most people listening to this are familiar with. Thomas Bizzle in the development of the Rising Bike double rifle and shotgun. This was a period in Victorian Britain which was marked with so many different advances in technology. I mean, perhaps there is no other time in history that we know of where so many amazing ideas were brought to life through different inventions. And John Rigby, I suppose part of, as the company we know it today, is supplying firearms to adventurers, professional hunters, people headed off to India and Africa. Is the legacy that I think we all buy into now when we think of Rigby and when we buy from the company. And there were so many sort of notable, people who carried Rigby's. Jim Corbett, W.D.M. Bell, J. Hunter. We've all read a lot of these guys' books. And the company continued on into the 20th century. The fourth generation of the Rigby family, Theodore Rigby, ran the business. And after his tenure, the company moved through sort of various different hands in the post-war years, which for many a company in the UK, particularly in the gun trade, it was a time where I think were pretty tough here in London after the Blitz. And it wasn't until the early 80s when the company came into the hands of Paul Roberts, who really sort of stepped up and invested a great deal of his personal wealth and time and passion into the brand to really put it back on the map. And another generation, or another golden era, should we say, of Rigby's since John Rigby III in the 100 years before him. In more recent history of Rigby's, more recent times, Rigby moved to America, where it was based out of California and then later Texas. And in 2013, we repatriated the company in its entirety. That was an operation that was sort of quietly going on here, but the whole company moved back over to London under my tenure as the CEO of Rigby's then. And we're 10 years back now in the UK. We started off with one or two gun makers and a few parts in a box, to try and build a few guns. And we've now got a team of 35 people here in London. We've just bought a new building because the company is expanding at such a rate, with a very significant order book and lots of very exciting projects in the pipeline.
Very, very good. There are certain gun manufacturers that have a certain allure about them, or people feel a certain way or associate them with certain things. Winchester is a company I think of, and you think of lever action rifles in the Wild West in the United States. Rigby is one of these companies I think of Africa when I hear the name Rigby. To a lesser extent, India as well, right? I think of the 275 Rigby, but I also think of, say, the 416 Rigby, and not only Jim Corbett in India, but Harry Selby in Africa and everything associated with that. And I remember when I very first got into this business, a partner of mine sent me a picture that he took of a British Airways advertisement in a magazine, and it has a British guy, looks like he's dressed up for safari, wearing his khakis and his boots, and he has his pith helmet on the chair next to him, and he's talking about an Englishman never went on safari without a fine claret, and he's sitting there reading his book and drinking his claret, and this guy looks like he could have just come. He looks like he could have been sitting in the Rigby booth at the SCI convention or something like that.
Absolutely.
Well, it's good to have you guys going back to those roots like that, and it seems like, talking to you guys at the shows and looking at your website and all of that stuff, it seems like Africa has really become a big focus for the company. It always has been, but especially lately.
I think you're absolutely right. Rigby is synonymous with Africa. When you think of Africa, you think of you think of Rigby, and there are other brands, but it is so closely associated with it. I can remember as a very young boy, I used to have a little Webley & Scott bolt action 410, a little single shot thing, and it's for shooting rabbits and the odd pigeon. And I can remember pretending it was a 416, sort of a heavy barreled, big bore, dangerous game rifle, and the romance of going on safari. So, even in my mind, and I could never, of course, at the time dreamt I'd end up in the position I am now running the business, but it is so core to what Rigby's is. And I think some of that comes from, and this is just my sort of personal view, if you look at other gun makers here in London and in the UK and Birmingham places, a lot of those brands, that there was a certain members of the British aristocracy, for example, buying those guns, people who had shooting estates in the UK or perhaps around the British Empire. Whereas the Rigby customer was different. He was an adventurous type. A lot of these guys would have been heading off as part of the UK military. They might be stationed out in India. They might be stationed out in Africa. They would take a Rigby bolt action with them. They might be professional hunters. They were people who had something about them that sort of, as I say, represented adventure. Jim Corbett, mentioned him earlier, living in India, hunting man-eating tigers and leopards, an extraordinary guy. And that is core to the DNA of what the brand is. Now, when we relaunched in 2013, Rigby had gone through a period of about 16 years in America. The latter of those, they made some really big inroads in trying to get the company back to its roots and being at the top table of gun making where it absolutely belongs. Before that, so we say the California years, I think the company did get lost, and when we got our hands on the thing back here, we wanted to give some credibility back to the name. It is such a special name. It is part of the rich fabric and tapestry of what it is to be British. And in order to do this, we didn't want to try and sort of reinvent the wheel. We just went back to the roots of the company. And Africa is so very romantic. Anyone who's been lucky enough to go on safari, been on safari, will tell you that, what you go there, you breathe in that sort of African dust, and you can never get out of your body. You're sort of always craving it. Someone said to me recently, "Don't book your first safari unless you can afford your second safari." And I think it's so true. It is very, very addictive being out there with the people and the wildlife. So we decided that the Africa must be the springboard for relaunching the brand, to give it the credibility, to bring back the romance of what made the company so famous. I made the decision very early on that my mission statement to myself. I sort of sat down and I got the keys to this thing, and I said to myself, what is it I want to be remembered for as the CEO of Rigby's? Whenever that time may or may not end, and it was quite simple. It was to leave Rigby's in a better condition and in which I inherited it, and also was to not lose myself as Mr. Rigby. I think it's very easy to forget that we are custodians and stewards of these amazing brands and companies. I mean, this company I am a shareholder for and run and privileged enough to work at. It's older than the United States. It was founded, I think, a year before the formation of the US, which is extraordinary. And it is very easy to sort of get lost in being here every day and thinking you'll be here forever. But really, we are stewards, we are custodians, and it's all about sort of passing it forwards. And again, it was, let's go back to what John Rigby did himself. Let's repartner with Mauser. Let's produce a rising bite. Let's delve into the romance of Africa and do what the great man himself did it, rather than sort of trying to think up something new, which isn't really Rigby in the first place.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the Rigby Dagga Boy Award. When did you guys first start presenting this award? And then we can go into the details of the current iteration.
Well, it's like sort of most ideas we have here. They normally sort of naturally evolve from maybe a conversation over a beer down the pub, or bumping into someone year after year at the conventions. And in this case, it's the latter. Dr. Kevin Robinson, Dr. many people will have known and read his books. He's a great friend of the company, very, very supportive. And over the formative years of relaunching Rigby's, Kevin and I we bump into each other with Simon Barr, our head of marketing, and we would talk about trying to put together some kind of scheme or award, or I wouldn't want to use the word competition because it's not like that, but some sort of way we could use our platform here at Rigby's to bring about really positive change in the hunting world. And we're, as a gun makers, a lot of us here are hunters. A lot of us have been to Africa. We're very passionate about hunting. And I mentioned earlier about being, stewards of the name Rigby's, but I think all hunters are custodians and stewards of our shared wildlife, wherever that may be in the world. And I think we have a duty to be hunting in a ethical, fair chase way that is for the betterment of the species and the environment in which we're hunting. And I think, if we take buffalo, for example, buffalo are one of the top species to pursue anywhere in the world. It's very, very exciting. It has a whole number of positives for, conservation, for local economy, for feeding local people. There's so many pluses for this sustainable hunting when it's done in an ethical way. And what we want to do is to use our platform here to perhaps shape hunting culture in a way that, in the same way that in Europe here, and particularly if you look at continental Europe, there's a focus on hunting post-breeding age, older males that have been pushed out of the breeding herd, that have passed their prime. So these animals have had a chance to pass on their DNA, and then they are, the ideal candidates as part of a management program for the betterment of the herd. And I think quite often, at Rigby, meeting clients, going to the shows, you see a lot of what I call sort of prime breeding age buffalo, which perhaps are not the best candidates for hunting. And this is not to say or to tell anyone what they should and shouldn't be doing when they're hunting. It's a very personal journey, anyone's hunting journey, and what means something to one person may not mean something to the other person. But we at Rigby feel very passionately that these post-breeding age buffalo that have been chivied out from breeding herds, they are ideal candidates as part of a management plan. Plus, the character of the shape of the horns, the character that they are of themselves, they are very, very exciting to hunt. They represent there's a danger element there. I think that's why a lot of us go hunt dangerous game, is the challenge of pursuing something like that. And we felt, speaking to Doc, that this sort of idea that started off, I think in an elevator in one of the hotel lobbies one year, about how could we use the platform of Rigby's, the name of Rigby's, to really get behind this really positive message, something that we can be really pro about and positive with, in the hunting world and wider society, to show hunting the best possible life. We felt that we would take this idea, and it originally started off with, we were going to call it the Scrum Cap Club. So if you hunted a Scrum Cap buffalo, then you could then join this organization, and it could collect data, because that's the other huge part of it, is collecting data to understand how old these buffalo are, where they're coming from, because it's something that hasn't really been done before. And then we changed it, and we decided to go with the Dagga Boy Award, because we wanted to open up for all Dagga boys. There might be one with broken off on one side, or he is a scrum cap, and there's such a wide variety of these post breeding age buffalo and how sort of gnarly the heads are. And it was with a big focus on science. So we wanted to know where these things were being hunted, if at all possible, getting access to their molars, their teeth, so we could understand a little bit about their race that way. Of course, it must be fair chase, ethical hunting, no high fences, in this particular award, that these are free-roaming wild buffalo, post-breeding age. And then anyone entering the competition would, this award system, which we really try to steer clear of that word competition, but to enter into the scheme would be able to provide a story of how it happens, photographs on these things, and all of this information went in together, which was then compiled into this amazing book, the Rigby Dagga Boy book, with all of the stories together, so you can share in the excitement of everybody else's Dagga Boy story. It was very difficult. We had to put together a sort of fairly complex scoring system to select an overall candidate that represented, in the purest form, what a Dagga Boy hunt was, and it had to be based on how old the buffalo was, the condition of the buffalo. So for the first award, Frank, he shot a very old buffalo with a very gnarly leg. So it wasn't just the state of the horns; it was also the animal was suffering, and it was the perfect candidate to be taken as part of that management plan. And then his own story, with his own injury that he was carrying, and we found as a panel of judges that was what he was the worthier winner. And he won a rifle, as did the PH, because Rigby really wanted to stand behind this and put money on the table. This was a free to enter award, but Rigby was really putting some money on the table, supporting with these prizes to really stand behind this message that we should, as a community, should be hunting these post breeding age buffalo.
Okay, very interesting. I know that this has been something of a passion project for Kevin for a long time, this idea of trying to do something to incentivize the harvest of older post-breeding age buffaloes, like you mentioned. And I know that Roland Ward has made some changes to their scoring system in the last few years as well to kind of go along those lines and maybe take away a little bit of the incentive there may have been for shooting younger bulls that may have scored really well. And so I was glad to see that. I was glad to see this partnership between John Rigby and Company and him to work on this sort of a contest. And so, if I understand correctly, you first did this in 2021. It was available for guys that shot buffalo, say, up the 10 previous years. Contest was complete, went really well. You made the book about it. Now you're doing it again. And this contest is basically along the same lines as the previous one, just for buffalo hunted, 22, 23, 24, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. So the first, again, there's that word competition, that for want of a better word, we have tried to steer clear of that. But the first sort of intake for the Dagga Boy Award, we went back a period of time just so we could get as many people as possible. What was so interesting is after that first award, we had a lot of PHs coming up to us at the shows and saying, for the first time in history of coming to this show, I'm now getting people coming up and saying, I want to win that Dagga Boy Award. I want to hunt a Dagga Boy. So let's book that safari, which is exactly what Kevin and Rigby's wanted to do with this initiative. And then moving forward, our plan is to roll it every 2 to 3 years, just to give enough time to get enough entrants, to enter and to be able to sift through them and find a worthy recipient of the award.
Okay, very good. Now, I'm looking on your website right now. I see that the judges for the like you said, I know you don't like calling it a competition, but the panel is Dr. Kevin Robertson, Robin Hurt, Buzz Charlton, and you. And it's an interesting, like you said, interesting scoring system you guys have to come up with. And it seems like it's very subjective on what is the quote unquote best, because you're looking at so many different factors with the development of the boss. Maybe he's got horn tips that are broken off. Maybe he's completely broken off on both sides. He's a complete scrum cap. He needs to be really old, but kind of everything else that goes into it, like you said, with the other buffalo that had the injured leg, and then everything going into the actual hunt associated with it. Seems like a very interesting judging system that you guys have had to come up with.
Absolutely. I think so. Historically, as you mentioned before, some of the other scoring systems, and this is not to say that any of them are wrong and ours is right. It's not like that at all. I just think that some of those scoring systems have awarded, higher scores to younger animals, which we feel at Rigby's is not commensurate with hunting in the 21st century. We've got massive pressure on us now from anti-hunting groups around the world who perhaps don't understand our way of life. And I think we have a duty ourselves to really look at what we're doing and how we're doing it and saying, is this appropriate in the modern era of hunting? Like what is hunting for the next century going to be? We dream about that golden era of a century ago. Well, we're in our own time now, and you're coming up with a scoring system was a challenge. But what was so interesting is that despite the sometimes subjective nature of it, is how similar everyone's scores would be on each different hunt. And we mentioned again that word earlier, competition, that trophy. That's another word we try and keep away from here, because it is such an emotive word within certain parts of society. These are words that have been used historically. You used the word earlier, harvest. I think that's a fantastic way of really talking about utilizing wild meat, protein. For example, depends. It doesn't matter where you're hunting around the world. I think sort of it's something none of us like doing, is looking at ourselves inwardly and thinking, okay, that's how we've always done it until now, but that doesn't mean that sort of aligns with society now. How can we reevaluate what we're doing to present ourselves in the best way, to make sure that best practices are happening, that we're hunting in the most ethical way for the betterment of the species that we're hunting? We have a duty of care to our sport and to the wildlife in which we manage in these amazing areas. And the scoring system is another element of that. And it's we've invited Buzz Charlton, who is extremely experienced in judging game animals, as a previous winner. You have Robin Hurt, who is one of the all-time legends of hunting, and one of I think one of the last of the really great hunters of yesteryear. Kevin, who is extremely knowledgeable on buffalo, but I think probably the world-leading expert. And then little old me, who sort of who hunted a few buffalo. I've seen lots of photos of buffalo and spent a lot of time in Africa. Also chipping in with my score. And it's so interesting how similar those scores have been when we've done. And we're talking hours and hours of work. It has been very, very involved. And I think I just want to take the opportunity to really thank those judges, because they've done it without any payment whatsoever and given a great deal of their time to support this scheme, which ultimately is all about making the lives of buffalo better, making our sport best it can possibly be in the 21st century.
I agree. This is a good deal all around, and it's like turning a giant ship in the water, right? It takes a long time to change attitudes about that, and it requires a lot of energy over a sustained period of time, but gradually you can make these changes, and you just got to continue to hammer away at it. And yeah, like you said, the old way of doing it wasn't necessarily wrong, but we maybe know more about wildlife conservation now than we did 100 years ago. And, it's okay to make changes that are based in science and that are incentivizing certain behaviors that, we think are positive, both for the wildlife populations as a whole, as well as for the public image of hunting.
If you look at heroes, hunting heroes of yesteryear, Jim Corbett, Dennis Finch Hatton, these guys were absolutely prolific hunters, hunting in regard to the golden era of hunting, but they were also conservationists. I mean, Jim Corbett, one of the first national parks in India, is named after him because of his conservation work. Dennis Finch Hatton, working with the then Prince of Wales, was talking about we have to conserve and preserve these species. I think hunters, we are the coalface. We are at the front line of where humanity and society is interacting with wildlife and wild spaces. And we know that these wild spaces are getting smaller, deforestation, growing populations in many different countries on many continents around the world. And I think in the spirit of the people from the past, I think if they were here today, they would be saying, is this the best way of doing it? Is there a better way of doing it, which is best for everyone? It's best for the local people. It's best for the wildlife. It's best for the people who choose this as their hobby or sport, whatever you want to call it. And I think it takes for us collectively for a moment of pause within ourselves, and it's not something I think human beings are very good at. Is looking inwardly and saying, okay, how can I be better? Because if we each individually do our own little part to make ourselves better, then the collective changes itself all on its own. And you mentioned, I think before, like sort of steering a giant ship, and it takes a lot of time. It absolutely does, but it starts with each individual person. It starts with each of us being on safari and saying, you know what, I'm probably not going to shoot that 5-year-old breeding age buffalo with this massive 45-inch spread, which is really pretty, but his boss isn't fully formed. He's holding the herd there. Maybe let's get out of the herd situation. Let's go and find these Dagga Boy groups, which are, considerably older. They've been pushed out. Their quality of life, I don't think, is all that good anyway. And they've got a pretty grisly end waiting for them, whether it be lions or hyenas. And taking them, and they often represent, in my experience, the most challenging and exciting hunt anyway, and certainly the most dangerous. Which I said earlier, I think is one of the things that brings us back time and again for hunting buffalo in Africa.
Yeah, I have a quote that I really like that illustrates this point well, and we'll do that, and then we'll go from there into talking about Rigby rifles in general, but we'll focus on the rifles that you guys are awarding as prizes for this contest. It's a quote I love from Elgin Gates. The true trophy hunter is a self-disciplined perfectionist seeking a single animal, the ancient patriarch well past his prime, that is often an outcast from his own kind. If successful, he will enshrine the trophy in a place of honor. This is a more noble and fitting end than dying on some lost and lonely ledge where the scavengers will pick his bones and his magnificent horns will wither away and be lost forever.
I think you're absolutely right. It's I think beautifully put, and I think if we can come together and really get on board with that message, it can only be a good thing for for us as a community, and also most importantly for the animals of all species that we're pursuing.
Now, to that end, you guys are putting your money where your mouth is and offering two prizes for the winner of this quote unquote contest. One, a Rigby 416 Big Game Rifle for the hunter, and then the PH will get a Rigby 450 PH rifle. Tell us about those rifles in a little bit more detail. What is different between them, and we can talk about some of your guys' other models, and then we can wrap up.
Sure. So the Big Game was the first model that we launched after our return to the UK. I mentioned earlier about sort of the romance of Africa, and of course the historical relationship with Peter Paul Mauser. So re-establishing both of those things at Rigby's was key. So we took two pre-war 416s. So there were only 189 of them made. They're some of the most desirable sporting bolt action rifles in the world. They often sell for many tens of thousands of dollars. I've seen them sell as much as $100,000. Those pre-war guns. And we took two of them. We reverse engineered them. We changed a couple of things to suit modern shooting styles, and we delivered the Big Game to the market. And if you think between 1912 and 1940, the golden era of gun making for Rigby's and safari hunting, they made only 189 416s. Oof. We have sold over 1,000 in 10 years, which is extraordinary. And I think it's a testament, actually, to the passion for African hunting to this day, and also Australia. Let's not forget about Australia. There's a lot of great buffalo hunting there as well. So that model, the Big Game, we have PH, which is the kind of more hard-wearing, slightly less fancy version, but it's underneath the bones are exactly the same as the regular Big Game, and the Big Game, which has a slightly higher level of wood and finish and these sorts of things on there. And as I say, this contest, quote unquote, is free to enter. We are doing it purely as a passion project with Kevin, because we believe so strongly in trying to change the culture around buffalo hunting. It's free to enter. We're getting no money out of it at all as a company. You can only imagine what it costs us to put those two rifles forwards, but we do it because we really care, and we really wanted to incentivize people and to create enough publicity around it that people would start to really look at this and to start approaching PHs at safari clubs and saying, yeah, I would like to come out, but I want to shoot a Dagga Boy. I want to pursue the old guy, so I can get the photo, so I have a chance of being awarded the honor of the Dagga Boy Award, and also this rifle for myself and a rifle for my PH. I'm not aware of any competition / contest, whatever you want to call it, out there within the hunting world which has something like that, and it's I think fairly groundbreaking. And again, I think it really backs up what we're trying to do here at Rigby's and what Kevin's really passionate about doing, and that is furthering our understanding of conservation and incentivizing people to make the best possible choices, for the betterment of buffalo hunting.
Mm-hmm. Now, it seems like the Rigby Big Game Rifle is a very functional, yet at the same time very elegant looking rifle that is going to look pretty sitting in your gun cabinet or in your gun safe and in photos and all that, but it's also the sort of rifle that is well built, reliable, accurate. You can literally trust your life to it out there on a hunt. Is that was that your vision when you designed that rifle?
Everything we sell at Rigby's must exist for a reason. You'll never see something sell here that doesn't have a story behind it or some sort of function behind it. I think it's very easy to start stamping Rigby on everything, just to sell it. And of course, Rigby, like every other business, is a commercial enterprise, but it is also a legacy, and it's about leaving that legacy, as I mentioned before, for the next generation. And all of our rifles, as beautiful as they are, form must follow function. So they have to work. People are buying them; they want them to work. but we're also hunting dangerous game here, so that it needs to be utterly reliable in the heat of the moment. But also to anyone who's listening, who's hunted Africa, or anywhere, a great deal of the time of hunting, you walking, you might be sat around waiting, and you have a lot of time to look at that rifle. So it might be in your gun room at home, it might be sat under a mapani tree in the Luangwa Valley, and you're sort of sat there and you looking at it, and we wanted the rifle to have the lines of and the sort of form of those pre-war guns. I got myself in trouble with a customer once quite early on, and I was describing the pre-war guns as originals. I said, well, the original 416s. And he said, don't ever say that again. And I said, I beg your pardon? He said, the big game, the guns that you're making now are also original Rigbys. They're also made by the company Rigby. They're just as original as the pre-war guns. And he's absolutely right. They've gone through the same processes as we would have done a century ago. The serial number series is exactly the same as a century ago. Your details are entered into the same ledger books, which date back to 1780 that we have, that is the same as 100 years ago. So it's as beautiful as they are, and as sort of connecting as they are to the brand for the customer, they must be reliable.
Do you make any left-handed rifles?
So we do make left-handed rifles in our London Best and Rising Bites series. So the London Best is our handmade bolt-action rifle. So it's similar to the big game, but it requires almost entirely sort of 95% handmade processes. So it's a different sort of level of finish that you get on the gun with more custom options. The big game, we do use more machine processes, which is why it's a quarter of the price of the London Best. London Best we can offer left-handed. I've looked to offer left-handed options in the big game. It's something we get asked about quite regularly. It just comes down to numbers. Unfortunately, they're just, up until now, there haven't been enough left-handed hunters wanting to buy into the big game to be able to justify the R&D costs and these things working with Mauser. So at the moment, it's often an ambidextrous stock with a right-hand bolt, or if you want a true left-handed bolt action, we can offer this in London Best.
Now, I would assume that of all the rifles you make, is the big game rifle the most popular in terms of just sheer numbers that you make?
It's the most popular alongside the Highland Stalker, which is it's a similar rifle. It's the little sister, I suppose, to the big game, which it's 275, 30-06, these sorts of calibers on a standard length Mauser action.
Now, in your big game rifle, I see you offer it in 375, 404 Jeffrey, 416 Rigby, 450 Rigby. Is the 416 Rigby the most popular chambering in the big game rifle?
Yeah, without a doubt, it is the most popular. I just think it's so timeless. There's absolutely nothing wrong with those other calibers. But I think if you're going to buy a Rigby, I think most people want to have a 416 Rigby.
Now, Highland Stalker, like you said, standard length Mauser rifle, so 275 Rigby, 308, 30-06, 8mm Mauser, 9.3 by 62. Which one of those is most popular? Is it 30-06, would you say?
275 Rigby.
Really?
Interestingly. But yeah, it's been very, very popular. So much so that we've actually just launched a few weeks ago the new big game rifle, which sits in between the Highland Stalker and the regular big game. It's called the Big Game Lightweight. And it's in 350 Rigby, which is a very suitable caliber for North American game, for African plains game and things, firing a 225 grain bullet. And we're working now with a couple of the ammo manufacturers out there to supply an off-the-shelf 350 bullet for that. So it's I think those range of rifles in all the different calibers, they've really opened up Rigbys to a much wider audience than historically, or at least since before the Second World War. Before the Second World War, the bolt-action rifles the company were making in partnership with Mauser were all about providing a Rigby to anyone who wanted to go to Africa, whether you were a member of the military or whoever you were. And in more recent times, it wasn't so easy making all these things completely by hand, but by partnering with Mauser again, one of our sister companies, we were able to utilize their machine parts and really get the production costs down on barrels and actions and even basic stock machining and these sorts of things to be able to forward those cost savings onto the customer to be able to provide a rifle that was very much in the spirit of what John Rigby himself intended for.
Now, as iconic as a bolt-action Mauser-style rifle in 416 Rigby or 375 or whatever is in Africa, there's something about a double rifle that people really just associate with Africa. And I think of John Sharp and his famous photo with the elephant tusk crossing the river and his double rifle and all that, which, if I understand correctly, was a Rigby double, right?
That's correct. Yeah, it's a 470, I believe, and it's I think if I remember, he had it rebarreled at some point, but it's an original Dolce head screw grip Rigby.
Well, tell us a little bit about your current production double rifles, and then we'll wrap up.
So after the big game was launched, we had the London best. The next step was double rifles. Rigby, again, it's synonymous with double rifles, and we wanted to get back. We didn't want to invent something completely new. That's not what people were asking us for. People wanted a Rigby. So we took one of the early 20th century Rising Bite double rifles. The Rising Bite is a patent of gun making which we've had since on patent since 1879, and Rigby made about 1,000 Rising Bites. Just for anyone who's not familiar with it, on the top of the barrels, as they lock down into the top of the action, there's a sort of horseshoe top extension. And when you operate the top lever, or in some cases side lever, a vertical bolt, a rising bite, comes up and locks into that horseshoe. So the rising bite is very popular. It's always attracted a great deal of fascination in how it works, because you're often with the top lever turning lateral movement into vertical movement, which you can see, and it's quite a cool oddity to play with. It's also extremely strong, very difficult to make. Company didn't produce them after 1932. Most of them stopped production in the First World War, and we started production again, I believe it was 2016, I think, when we finished the first one. And we just exactly replicated those guns of a century ago. And to say it's been a success is a massive understatement. I think I have 200 of them on the order books right now. Retail price starts at about £125,000. So it's keeping our guys very, very busy here. It is a very involved project with the customer, having these things made for you, fittings, choosing woods, all the different options you can have, and seeing this thing sort of grow out of nothing over a 2 or 3 year period. And many of those are now back in Africa, hunting dangerous game as they were designed to do. But mentioned with the Highland Stalker and big games, Rigby's was always about having the ultra high end, but also something more accessible for people hunting anywhere in the world. So this year we launched our new Shikari box lock double rifle. So we took again a century-old design, the box lock gold head that Rigby was very well known for producing. They were buying in barreled actions from Birmingham and then finishing them up, as many other gun makers did. And they were carried by many famous hunters and game wardens and these sorts of people. And the Shikari is very much in the spirit of that rifle. It's available in 450, 470, and 500. And I think we've to date taken 80 orders now for that already. So that comes in at about £38,000. So you've got two ends of the market there, catering for everyone. And I've always felt since the beginning of my tenure here that Rigby should be available to everyone, whether you're 10-year-old boy walking on the booth at Safari Club and we'll give you a baseball cap complimentary, and you might come back in 20 years and buy a gun, or whether you walk in and you order a trio of Rising Bite 500s, which also happens. Rigby's belongs to all of us. It's our shared sort of hunting and gun making heritage. And I feel very passionately that there should be a product range, a portfolio of different things that are available to lots of different people, depending on what it is they need for their hunt.
Now, would it be accurate to describe your big game and Highland Stalker rifles as semi-custom models, and then say the Rising Bite, the Shikari, the London Best as full custom jobs?
That's correct. That's correct. So it's there are some custom options on those entry level rifles, and then the high end stuff. It's fully custom. It's you have a dream, we will make it happen for you.
Now, is it necessary for someone to get physically, quote unquote, measured for a big game or a Highland Stalker rifle like they would be for a double or one of your shotguns?
No, that there are some fitting options that we can offer. It is more limited, hence the price. But the stocks are, as ergonomic as they can be to fit as many people as they can be. So, for example, we machine the stocks up as long as possible because it's easier to cut them down than it is to glue wood back on. The tree is finished its job by that point, so it's easier to cut them down. So, we start off. I think the longest we can go with a pad is 15 and 3/4 inches, which is a long stock on a rifle, and then we can bring it right down from there if anyone requires it. But it's as I said before, we try and cater for as many people as possible. The limitations within the Big Game Highland Stalker is simply because they are using more machine techniques to produce them for the price that they are. That limits the custom options, and for those customers who want to go really big on custom options, they have the Rising Bite and the London Best available to them.
Okay, well, very, very good. I will, of course, put links to the Rigby website in general on in the show notes to this episode, as well as for the Rigby Dagga Boy contest, that specific page. I'll put it in there. Anything else that you'd like to say to the audience as we wrap up before we say goodbye today?
I think all I would say is I actually mentioned this in a speech recently that I'm rather sort of poetic, I think, in my gun making and my running of Rigby's. That so often we talk about Rigby as if it is a bronze ornament on a mantelpiece somewhere collecting dust, that it's something other than ourselves. And that just simply isn't the case. What Rigby is a collection of people that believe in an amazing idea. And that's not just the people who work here every day, whether they're the gun makers at the bench, the accounts team upstairs. There's a lot of people here doing a lot of different things. It's the people at home listening to the podcast now, whether they bought a Rigby, whether they're thinking about buying Rigby, whether they bought a hat, whatever it might be, that whatever support they may have for the brand, you are part of Rigby as much as we are here. And I would just like to take this moment to really say thank you for the amazing support we've had in bringing Rigby's back. 10 years ago, 10.5 years ago, when I started this thing, I didn't have two bits of paper to rub together. And if you had spoken to me then as a 25-year-old lad, as I was, that 11 years later you would be in this position with this huge order book with such a massive global following, that you had repatriated the company to the UK and to a level where it hasn't been for a century, I'm not sure I would have believed it. And it has been solely down to the people working at this company who work so very hard, and the people at home who step up and they support the company by purchasing rifles and other products. And thank you so very much.
Okay, well, very good. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today, Marc.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Now, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel right now and hit that like button. Just click on the thumbs up button and the red subscribe button below the video to make sure you don't miss out on any of my new videos about hunting gear reviews, cartridge comparisons, cartridge profiles, interviews like this, and more. Now, there is a link below the video to where you can learn more about the Rigby Dagga Boy Award and learn how to enter. I've also put links below the video to articles I've written about some of my favorite pieces of hunting gear like slings, ear protection, and scopes. Now, for more detailed information on popular hunting cartridges and what they're best suited for, click the link in the description below or go to huntingguns101.com. Sign up there and you can get a free ebook I have written on the best hunting cartridges. Now I'm going to turn it over to you. Have you successfully hunted Cape Buffalo before? If so, tell me about the hunt. Where were you hunting? What rifle and ammo did you use? Was it a really old, broken up bull like Marc and I discussed? Let me know by leaving a comment on this video right now. Also, feel free to leave a comment with requests for other videos you'd like to see in the future. Other interviews, other cartridge comparisons or profiles, that sort of thing. Thanks for watching. Have a great day and good hunting.